Hello students, today we're going to look at expected expansionary monetary policy. So in part 1, we looked at unexpected, and now looking at if people anticipate the policy. So steps 1 to 4 are the same for whether it's expected or unexpected. So the Fed is going to be buying bonds, and that's going to increase the money supply. And when there's a larger money supply, then that's going to be a larger supply of loanable funds, and that's going to drive down the interest rate, and that's going to increase investment. And the increase in investment is going to, in turn, shift aggregate demand out. So all is the same compared to expected with unexpected expansionary. So the only difference comes at the very end when we're drawing our ASAD diagram. So here's our LRAS curve. So what is different now is that because people expected the policy, that means that workers knew this was going to happen. So workers knew prices were going to rise. And as a result, if you know prices are going to go up, you're going to ask for a raise from your boss so you can afford those higher prices. And like I was saying before, when workers negotiate for raises, that's going to increase the cost for the firms. And firms respond to higher costs by slashing production. Lower production means SRS shifts back. So perhaps you're wondering, does this look the same as when there was the policy? When the policy was unexpected, what's the difference? Well, when the policy was unexpected, workers were surprised when price went up. They couldn't start negotiating until after the AD curve had already shifted. Here, they knew this was going to happen, so they negotiated for their raises to arrive at the same time as the AD curve shifts. So before this happened first, AD shifts out, then SRS shifts back. Now when the policy is anticipated, they both shift at the same time. So we don't go out here temporarily, we go from here straight to here. So we have P0 star down here, and this will be P1 star. So we should do our analysis of our three variables of interest. So in the short run, we have prices rise, star P0 star, end at P1 star. GDP is going to start at Y star and also end at Y star, so that's going to be unchanged. Unemployment is going to go from U star to also U star, so also unchanged. So that is our short run. So you see that unlike when the policy was a surprise, here we do not get a short run boost to the economy. We just get inflation. In the long run, well, here we're already in long equilibrium. And when you're in equilibrium, there's no further tendency to change, so this will be same as short run. So we also have some terminology from before about money being neutral or non-neutral. Remember, we said money is neutral if it doesn't affect real GDP. So in this model, money that is anticipated is neutral in both the long run and the short run. Unexpected money was neutral in the long run only, but not in the short run, as we saw from before. So just to clarify a difference in the graphs, I'll try to show both expected and unexpected expansionary monetary policy. Sorry, my voice is still not 100%, even though I've been feeling better for several days. So like we said before, they both have AD and SRES shifting, but the timing is where the distinction lies. When the policy is anticipated, they shift simultaneously. When the policy is a surprise, AD shifts first and then SRES shifts later. So you could call this point A over here. This is point B, and this is point C. So we showed that when the policy was a surprise, we started A, then went to B in the short run, and ended up at C in the long run. We showed here, though, when the policy is expected, you go from this point straight to that one. You don't stop over here because the curves shift at the same time. So that means you go from A straight to C. So that is how expected expansionary monetary policy works. Now let's talk about contractionary. Well, I should say one last thing about expected expansionary. So this result here is a little bit controversial in the macroeconomic research. So it's widely agreed that the policy is a surprise. You get a short-run boost to the economy at the expense of inflation in the long term. There is some disagreement, though, as to whether expected expansionary monetary policy gives you this result. In some papers, you still get some boost in the short run, though maybe not quite as large as it would have been if the policy had been a surprise. We're also going to follow your textbook, which shows that the policy is anticipated. You get no short-run boost, you just get inflation. All right, moving on, look at contractionary monetary policy. So all the same things, but in reverse. So you compare to part 2, we had unexpected contractionary, the same first 4 steps. So we said in order to do contractionary monetary policy, first the Fed is going to be selling bonds. People buy those bonds with money, so money is going to leave people's pockets and go into the Fed and just sit there. This decrease in the money supply is going to decrease the amount of loanable funds, and that is going to increase the interest rate. Higher interest rates mean less investment, which means there's going to be less aggregate demand. We showed all that in part 2. So let's set up our diagram. So AD shifts back when you have the contractionary monetary policy. Now, again, the difference arrives in the timing of the SRS curve shift. So here the policy was known that was going to happen. So firms knew that prices would fall, and they're going to react to offset that. So if firms are going to start having lower prices, what they got to do is they got to start cutting their costs. So they start negotiating for lower wages for their workers. And this can work out because if everything costs 1% less, I can pay you 1% less money, and you're not any worse off. Now, lower wages mean lower costs, and lower costs mean you can start producing more. So some production that would have been unprofitable now becomes profitable, and you're going to be making more stuff now. And that shifts the SRS curve out. Again, the big difference here is that now SRS shifts out at the same time as when AD shifts back. So it takes time to adjust wages. We talked about that back in chapter 13. So if you're caught off guard, like you were in part 2, you didn't know this was coming, then you didn't know I should have been negotiating lower wages. You only start negotiating after the policy has already arrived, so you have this delayed effect when the policy is a surprise. But when you know it's coming, you can prepare for that in advance, and you can time it so that your wage cuts arrive at the same time as your price cuts. So this happens all at the same time. So let's do our analysis. Short run, prices fall. P0 star to P1 star, GDP and unemployment are both still at their original levels. And because we went from one equilibrium straight to another one, long run is going to be the same as short run. So this would be an ideal scenario for what we're looking at right now, if you're watching this in 2023. So the idea is that you could lower inflation without causing a recession. That is different from what we saw back in part 2. If the policy was a surprise, you still lower inflation, but you could temporarily cause a recession. But here you can possibly dodge that if the policy is fully anticipated. So that's the hope that we're trying to get with the economy right now. So like I do with the expansionary, I want to show on the same graph the expected and the unexpected. So we had this diagram here for expansion. Let's just add contractionary. So we showed in part 2 that unexpected contractionary policy, I guess I gotta add another point here. I'll call this point D. That'll take you from C to D to A. So you start with the higher prices, in the end you have lower prices, though in the middle you get this recession where GDP is below its potential. If instead the policy is expected, you get the lower prices, but you dodge the recession. So from C to A.